Computer. All right. Well, hello, I am Lisa Anna Palmer, founder and CEO of Light Your Leadership, author of the international best-selling Light a Fire in Their Hearts, The Truth About Leadership, and creator of Little Talks. Today, we are going to be talking about leadership and the importance of mastery under pressure with the amazing Tina Greenbaum. I met Tina through our mutual friend and awesome coach, Peter Beckenham, the village marketer. Peter said, Lisa, you just have to meet Tina, as she is also very passionate about helping leaders. And was he ever right? You know, it was such a delight to meet Tina, and it was a real honor to have her on our show. I mean, after all, she's California's #1 optimal performance specialist. So, so pleased to have you here on Little Talks.
Thank you, Lisa. And I love that little talk. I love that.
Yeah, so I'm just going to share a little bit more with our listeners about your background. And, you know, I think what you bring is expertise, it's depth, it's knowledge, and also having the background as a psychotherapist, I think is really interesting in the leadership realm. So I encourage every leader to have a coach and a therapist. So, so a little bit more about Tina. So Tina holds a master's in education and is a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed psychotherapist, and a professional sports psychology consultant. Wow, she is the founder and CEO of Mastery Under Pressure, a management coaching program for high-performing executives who need to refine and master their interpersonal and interdepartmental skills. Very, very important. And Tina has long understood that being good at your profession doesn't make you good at your job. Is that ever true, right? So we can be really great at, whatever skill, profession, etc., but it doesn't necessarily mean that like we're lighting it up and that we're leading others to want to be their very best. Her program, Mastery Under Pressure, gives CEOs and senior level managers the tools they need to excel while at the same time empowering their teams and associates. So once again, Tina, welcome to Little Talks.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm so happy to be here. Truly.
That's wonderful. So let's dive in, right? Let's dive into Mastery Under Pressure. So Tina, based on your extensive experience in your program and your practice, etc., what would you say are the top 3 to 5 pressure points for senior managers?
Great question, Lisa. So as you said, managers are usually promoted because they're very good at their skill. And as you and I know, really good managers are good coaches. Good leaders are good coaches.
Right.
They inspire their people who are, that they're managing. And so that requires a whole other set of skills that most probably they haven't learned because they haven't just gone to school for it, and they haven't taken courses. They haven't worked with somebody to really kind of up-level these skills.
Right.
So some of the problems that we see are just that. Emotional intelligence, managing yourself under pressure, being able to be calm, cool, and collected when everybody else is kind of flying by the seat of their pants.
Yeah, that is quite a skill.
Okay. It is a skill. Yeah. And it requires a great amount of self, as another wonderful podcast that I was on the other day, she calls it self-leadership. And in order to lead others, we have to be able to lead ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So it's not necessarily the top 3. It's when I get short and I don't have that attention span. Or one of the other things that is very, very true about leaders and people who are actually natural leaders, emotionally intelligent, they see things way ahead of other people,
right?
Which is kind of why they are leaders. And so that's the good news. The bad news sometimes is like, well,
right.
Get with it. I can't believe this is taking you so long. Or how could you not see this? Or that level of frustration, or, I just might as well do it myself because it's taking too long. And
yeah, that comes up a lot, right?
Yes.
And they end up, that's a pressure point, right? That ending up doing the work themselves because others aren't keeping up necessarily. And right. I like the part that you said, they can see further ahead. And part of the frustration is maybe sometimes the lack of insight that others can't see
That's
what
right.
they're seeing. Right?
That's right. Do you know what? I never thought that common sense was a gift.
It's not as common as we think.
That's right. And I didn't learn that honestly until I was about 30 years old. And people used to say to me all the time, it's like, Tina, how do you know that? How do you know that? And it's like, I don't know. How do you not know it? It's like right in front of you.
Right.
And just having a conversation with a really good friend just the other day, when we were talking about, I always have learned, no, I actually instinctively behave with the understanding that I understand consequences. By the time I was really young. So I would do my homework on a Friday afternoon, because who wanted to do it, have it hanging over my head over the whole weekend? And
right.
And, I was never the one to stay up all night and do all-nighters, and kind of leave it to the last second, where it caused so much stress. I mean, I just finished this morning working on a program that has kind of been behind, causing me a lot of, I want it off my plate. I want it off my plate. And so she said, I didn't have that gift. I just kind of do things as they come along. And so that flavor of people who are kind of more impulsive, don't really kind of see the, in certain industries or certain things, people can see what's coming ahead. And then again, that's the great leader, they can see, well, I already know where you're going and you're heading into trouble.
Right.
It's like kids, like raising kids a lot of times.
Right.
Walk into the wall and they smack themselves. And so sometimes we have to allow people to do that.
Right.
And we also want to bring to their intention. Again, these are skills that you want to bring to people's attention so that they can become better.
You just made me reflect on this. And, can we say that oftentimes leaders, we create our own pressure points because of some of the decisions we make, or maybe that impulsivity you mentioned, or it's like, oh, got to get it done now, rather than planning it out and creating reasonable. So in fact, a portion of the pressure points that we're experiencing might actually be our own. I know I'm guilty of that, because I wasn't the type to finish things on a Friday. So I have to admit, I've had a couple of all-nighters. So I admired people like you, Tina.
But, people say to me, you're so disciplined. It's not discipline.
Right.
For me, it's like, how do I want to do it? And believe me, I am so not perfect. I've got a lot of things in my that kind of hang over, but my mind always goes to, okay, so I'm always weighing the consequences.
Right.
Weighing the priorities. Again, helps me make decisions in the moment that, again, great leaders are good decision makers. And sometimes we have to know when to make the decision in the moment. And sometimes we have to be really smart and say, you know what, I need to think about it.
That's a very good point. So if we were to talk about it, coming from the perspective of like, what are some of the things that are causing frustrations? I think we mentioned a couple of them. You mentioned a few things about, being able to see ahead and others not necessarily keeping up with that. What are some of the other things that are causing frustration or grief, or, affecting the quality of life of leaders?
Well, I think, given the time that we're talking about right now, we're right in the middle of COVID, the fourth or fifth round. And to be able to maintain a level of neutrality within.
Please tell me more about that. Yeah.
So mindfulness, the word for the definition of mindfulness that I use, it's being mindful in the present moment without judgment. It's kind of one of those things. It is what it is. What's the reality? What's the truth?
Right.
And so I don't know anybody on this planet that is happy at this moment in time. the situation.
Right.
It's
Right.
not any, it's one of those things that there's not a human being alive that's not being affected
Right.
by what we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the ones that can thrive, do more than survive and thrive? And then as great leaders, we have people who really perhaps don't have the skills that they need in order to manage the loss, the frustration, the fears, everything that's going on. And so my position is that as a leader, you have a responsibility to have these skills under your belt. And I say it really, really seriously, because otherwise you bleed your issues all over everybody else.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, let's go down that route a little bit around when leaders don't develop these skills, or which is fairly common, because it's not necessarily, for some people it is intuitive and for others it's not. And there's typically more focus put on the on other skills, on the professional skills, on the technical skills when we promote people, and then they're kind of left to sink or swim on their own. So our hearts go out to new managers, new leaders who are trying to figure out what it is that they need to do to be able to engage and inspire their employees. So let's take a look at when leaders don't have these skills, or people in manager roles don't have these skills, and they're under pressure, and they're trying to master that pressure. However, in certain situations, they're not conscious of what's going on.
That's right.
What are the impacts and effects on their teams? How does it translate in behaviors towards others around their teams, their colleagues, others in the organization?
So just imagine, okay. And I want to go back, remind us to go back to actually what are the skills?
Yeah, for sure.
People may not really kind of have a good sense of that, but let's just imagine that I've had a bad day. At my house, my wife is mad at me because I'm not around. My kids are mad at me that I'm not around. I had a flat tire on the way to work, and any number of things that just by the time I get there, I'm already stressed. And so somebody comes and asks me something, and my temper is kind of short because I don't have the tolerance, I don't have the bandwidth that I need to be in the position that I'm in. And however it is that you have learned from your history, from your childhood, of how you manage that kind of stress. Some people get passive. Just did what I was working on this morning is I created a program called How to Be a Confident Negotiator, and talking about assertiveness training and the styles of communication. So sometimes if you're very passive, people get really annoyed with you because they know there's stuff going on, but you're not talking. Or you could be passive aggressive, where somebody asks you something and rolling your eyes, or you're sighing, or you're giving, again, you're not saying the words, but it's very clear. Disapprove of them at that particular moment. Or you can be aggressive, and the aggressive is kind of my pointing my finger at you. It's not me, it's you. You're the one who didn't do this, and you're the one who didn't show up, and you're the one. People kind of point fingers at each other and do that. The other person on the other end says, no, it's not me, it's you. And this is how,
like the blame game, right?
Like conflict and so on. So there's so many nuances of human behavior, communication skills, and kind of the way that I teach my program is I teach focus, how to be in focus, when you're in focus, when you're out of focus, because if you're not focused and you're talking to somebody and you're getting distracted, they get the message that I'm not really important. You're not really listening to me. Right? So all of that listening, those listening skills and eye contact and open body. And again, lots and lots of skills to learn. So I teach focus, relaxation, how to increase your body's tolerance for stress. so that we can, in an instant, change that nervous system from the one that's agitated to the one that's got calm and cool.
Right.
But you have to practice it.
Mm.
So people say, well, I took a breath. Well, yeah, you took a breath like, which then puts you into a state of hyperventilation.
You mean the brown bag.
So learning how to meditate, meditation was at one time very, thought of it, excuse me, as very woo-woo, and, only the yogis did it. And now, thank goodness, the neuroscience is really proving to us what it does and what it does for us. And so the whole purpose, and then I teach how to deal with the negative self-talk and transform it into what I call productive thinking. Do my thoughts produce something useful for me? How to visualize, using visualization before you have an event, before something really important, or during, or even after, and then dealing with fear. And fear frequently runs us without awareness. So these are the skills that I teach. And they come from a lot of different places. I didn't make them up. But if you were an Olympic level athlete, which as a senior manager, you're being required to perform at that level, they would no sooner go out there to compete without training.
Right.
And yet we put all these folks into situations with no training and expect them
to
perform at a high level. So it's not fair to them. It's not really, it's not being fair to yourself. It's not being fair to, the organization that promotes them without that kind of training. Right.
And a 3-day workshop, once you're promoted, it's not going to do the trick.
No.
Right.
No, it just will introduce them to these things that we're talking about.
Right.
I teach it from a body-mind perspective because we're training the body and training the mind to work in sync so that we can increase our tolerance for stress. So the way I kind of talk about it is the window of tolerance. So here comes the stress, and here's my nervous system's capacity to operate in this territory. Now I'm increasing the stress, but I haven't increased my tolerance. Here comes the stress. Now I've hit my peak, and then the stress response starts. So the hormones start to flow, the cortisol, the steroids, and then the muscles get tight, the heart begins to race, and most importantly, the mind goes offline. We need to be the executive. Executive is executive functioning right here in the prefrontal cortex, gone, which is why we can't think clearly when we're under stress. Haven't trained to do it. Who wouldn't want these skills, Lisa?
Right. Absolutely. No, well, they're key. And as I mentioned earlier, why not start early before people are actually promoted? Right? Everyone in the organization could benefit from these types of skills. So by the time they get to lead, or they practice them, they know how to use it. And it's that emotion, being able to manage our emotions, being able to create situations where the stress is not transferred to others. That's amazing, because that in itself would certainly get to the heart of reducing the toxicity and creating psychological safety in organizations, right? Because I've seen it happen, and I'm sure a lot of people come to you for first in therapy, now with your programs, as a result of having been in toxic environments, and sometimes not even knowing how they've contributed to that toxicity, right? Not having that awareness. It's like, my team is not doing their work, I don't understand, they're gossiping this and that and the other. And it's like, meanwhile, every time you walk in the door, you're crapping all over them, right? Right. So it's gonna transfer. So I think these are fundamental skills that you are teaching. That I wish.
I started out, in my as a therapist, and I am a therapist. It's my profession, but I'm a teacher. And so I'm a very coachy therapist. We don't have a name for me really. Somebody gave it theracoach, somebody, performance coach. But the truth is, having the skills that I've learned have always put me back in the position. Well, it's great. So your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, but you're not changing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if I'm going to be successful with you,
Right.
successful as we all do, I need some other skills. And that took me into this whole field of mind, body, getting under the getting under the conscious mind, because that's what happens.
I love that. I love that. And just even bring talk a little bit about the reactions, when people first have that realization or that awareness that you're helping them to gain in your process. That must be quite a neat experience.
It's really neat. I'll just tell you, I have a group now. I have a 12-week program, and we're coming up to group. I think next week is 11. We're catching up towards the end. So there was one fellow who came in and who was a senior manager, and he said, I don't know why I took this course. Somebody, recommended. I have 7 people from one company in the course, and he just kind of signed on. And he said, I don't even stop for lunch. I don't know what you're talking about. So the first module was on focus and taking time it's a breath awareness kind of thing, an accounting thing. And so he came back the next week and he said, well, I did my homework, but I'm really annoyed because I did the homework and I didn't do other things that I need to do. So then the next week he came back and he said, I did the homework. I liked it. And I feel really calmer.
Love it.
Next week he said, I'm not coming to class because I'm going to play hockey that I haven't played in a year and a half. So he was actually taking a night.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. So it was just, just this wonderful progression. And I really want to point out to people, because I think it's really important. It's not that people don't want to change. It's not that they want to kind of bleed this stuff all over people. Most times they just don't know how.
Right.
They don't know how to change it. I had somebody who said to me one time, she said, I really want to get up there and do public speaking and make presentations, but I can't stop my heart from racing like crazy. So it's really taking this on as equally or more important, because it affects every aspect of your life, not only your work, as seriously as you do your studies. So the way I look at it is, in one of my presentations, I have a triangle. So here is your professional, your skill level, all the time that you spend in school and learning your craft. And then when you're in business, you have a business strategy to take this skill into the business world and strategize how you're actually going to make money, right? But the third leg of it is the mental side. And this is the side that most people don't train. Right. And before COVID, and I've been doing this for a long time, so I've been really seeing the progression. Before COVID, when I would talk to companies and, what we do, it's interesting. It's important, but it's not urgent. Right. Now it's important and urgent. Yes. Right before you and I got on, I just was flipping through Flipboard and seeing headlines of how COVID has changed the world, and the level of drug abuse and the level of suicide and the level of depression and the level, so now without the buffer and people really, and it being pushed to the limits, we don't have the skill and we don't have the bandwidth to deal with this pressure. It's true, and it's like you said earlier, right? Everyone's affected. Everyone has varying degrees of trauma. And now having to go in Canada, we're a little bit at a different, I think, stage as maybe in the US, but right now, and I think there are similarities, but there's some differences as well. But right now, for example, the federal government is trying to figure out how to get people back into the workplace.
public servants. And, you know, there's all kinds of reactions. People are afraid. They're afraid. What's it going to look like? Managers are afraid. Leaders are afraid. There's a lot of fear. There's grief. People who've lost relatives, people who are afraid of losing relatives, people who are afraid for their health. So there's a lot of fear, grief, and all these things that they just don't teach you about in school, which are super important. And I think both you and I and others in this type of transformational leadership field really see the need to support leaders through this, because if we don't support them and they fall apart, it's gonna have huge implications for the employees, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you know, in terms of talking about grief, excuse me, I'm working. Excuse me.
That's okay. Have a sip.
I have a client who's a CTO of a cybersecurity company, and I said to him, "What's your?" You know, he calls our time together. He calls it Tina time.
Tina time. Love it.
He sits back. It's Tina time, and we lay out a problem, and we kind of look at solutions and things that are going on within him. And he said, I don't worry about the technical part, even though that's my job, because I have a whole team behind me,
right,
that can solve those problems. He says, my job is people.
Right. Love it.
I'm going to motivate them to continue and get through all these really difficult times. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch him take this on as seriously as he's taken on other things, and really talks about sometimes, I don't like to be criticized. Nobody really likes to. He said, but he came from a family where his parents were, you know, if you didn't get the 100, you got the 99. Well, what happened to that one last point? And he's very concerned about not putting that level of pressure onto his employees, that his expectations may be too great. And at the same time, come on, guys, let's level up. We got something really, really important to do. So just another way of looking at, you know, that position. And the other thing we talked about was, he said, you know, it was a lot easier doing what I was doing before. Now I really have these new things that I have to do. And I said, well, your identity has changed. And this is, you know, you are experiencing a period of loss from that old identity of being the senior manager instead of the, you know, the CTO. And he said, well, I never thought of it that way. So when we're leaving something and moving on to something else in that transition, there is a transformation, and we are leaving behind people, you know, jobs, sometimes locations. And sometimes people can't want, you know, like, I should be really happy and I'm feeling really sad.
Right.
So we have to acknowledge the loss, the grief, the anger, all the different, you know, aspects of grief and loss, so that we can then kind of close that chapter in a healthy way. And then that sets us off, you know, for the next chapter.
And those are excellent points, you know, about, you know, and managing change and transition, right? I just thought of something, and I don't think I've ever asked this question, but I certainly have had it often. I think you're the perfect person to respond to it. When leaders go through a transformation, so they're learning all these new skills. So people, and they go back to the same team who are expecting them to behave a certain way, or colleagues. How, you know, what is some advice on how to handle that? Because I mean, I experienced that with my clients as well. And they're like, you know, I'm almost afraid to go try out these new things that are more positive. You know, there's expectations of me that I'm going to be like the tough, hard-nosed leader, right? So tell us more about that. I think it's fascinating.
It's not only at work, it's also at home. It's
Mm.
also with friends. So as we change, and I always think of transformation not in turning into somebody else, we're really turning into ourselves.
Mm. Right. Our truth, right?
Coming home,
Mm.
coming home to who we truly are, and being able to release the layers
Mm.
of habitual patterns that we have grown into.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are, this new leader, this transformed person who has done a good bit of this personal work, coming back, and everybody has an expectation of them to be a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I always tell people, sometimes, particularly even with family members, you have to allow me to change.
Mm.
You have an expectation of me that was a way that I was behaving. And you are responding to me as if I'm still that person.
Wow.
But I'm not.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
So actually laying it out, acknowledging the transformation, like you said, it is, you know, helping that person find their true selves, right? And then actually being conscious and intentional about it, communicating it to those around us at home and to the team. Wow, that is powerful. And then asking for the space to be themselves, really.
Yeah. Give me a chance.
Yeah, give me a chance. Don't take advantage now.
We project onto people, right? We project on our expectations of them.
Right.
I used to say, I had gotten divorced and I was dating for a long time. And so I met my second husband. And I used to say, I want somebody to see me, not a projection of their ex-boss, their mother, their ex-mother-in-law,
Right.
their, you know, just, but that person has to be healthy enough
Right.
within themselves to recognize that I'm in front of this person, and this is not my ex or my mother or somebody like that, or my ex-boss or any of those.
Right. Like I think people call that the baggage, right? And certainly, you know, even before COVID, there was a lot of transformation happening in organizations. So people would, like, you'd hear it, you know, oh, they've been through 3 transformations in the last 6 years, so they have a lot of quote unquote baggage, right? So which, you know, manifested in the person being maybe a little bit more jaded than they were before being treated that way, or you know, or you'd hear, oh, I've had 6 different bosses in a year, so now maybe they don't trust bosses as or new managers as easily or whatnot. So I love what you're saying about the projection, right? And to have that awareness, I think that that's part of that emotional intelligence, is that when you are a leader, is to know that people are projecting what they've experienced onto you. So
absolutely.
right,
You are going to get everything. You are going to get every authoritative projection that you could ever imagine.
Right. And to have the ability to kind of stay whole through that process, and while you're establishing yourself, and your brand of leadership versus maybe what others have experienced in the past, is, I think, is probably a challenge. And all the skills that you mentioned would be very, very useful in that situation.
You know, I mean, really, Lisa, what we're talking about, and I'm kind of loving this, because I think I'm hoping that your listeners will understand that this is not a snap thing. This is a process. It's actually a lifetime process.
Yeah.
Where we begin to get to know our patterns, you know, and you use the word many times, and I use it all the time. It's awareness.
Yeah.
I can't change anything until I'm aware of what I'm doing.
Right.
You know, I can't change anything unless I'm aware of how people are receiving me. So many times I do need to have the feedback. And that's where people like you and me come in, because we're neutral. Really. I don't have any expectation of the way anybody's supposed to be.
Right.
And their behavior doesn't affect me once they leave my office, or once they leave my group. So I can be a very neutral person and say, would you like to know how I'm hearing this?
Mhm.
You know, I'm picking up a tone.
Mhm.
You know, you just got a little anger in there, or you got a little chip on your shoulder. Or
Mhm.
but I always ask permission,
Right.
right?
Right.
Sometimes people don't want to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the process of personal growth and transformation is huge. But I always say it's like, what could be more interesting than you?
No kidding,
Why don't you want to learn?
Yeah. And I love also that you brought in the notion of self-leadership. We talk a lot about self-leadership and how really it's from the inside out. And um, the type of skills you mentioned, focus, relaxation, being able to deal with a negative self-talk, which we all carry around, have these internal conversations, which then translate into our behaviors, right? And visualizing, dealing with fear. I mean, those are all the big ones. Those are all the big, challenges that if left unchecked, if you don't learn the skills to deal with those things, that's what's going to form your leadership approach, and that disengages people and drives people to out the door or on sick leave or to gossip or to have create toxic environments. So definitely, I hope one day, I'm hopeful that we'll see these as fundamental skills that are
Yes,
not just add-ons
that's
to
right.
corporate programs. They're like the fundamentals of leadership, and then the other stuff is flows from it, right?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I'm not the one that's going to go and do the mission purpose statements, and
Right.
which are incredibly important. I always kind of look at it as you start with you, and then you are that person that you bring to the situation, and then all the other stuff becomes
Right.
incredibly valuable.
Right. And actually you're almost like clearing the channel to be able to bring forth a vision that is much more powerful than if there are layers of anger that cover it, or you feel like you're forced to be doing these kinds of things. When you are able to stay in that neutral zone, I guess you were saying, right? When there's chaos all around us, is when we come that clear channel to be able to support others in the process, and also to be able to have those great ideas and the innovation happen, right? And then the mission becomes meaningful. It's not just like,
Oh, and then if you had a whole team that had this kind of
imagine
right, oh my God.
an entire organization practicing self-leadership and knowing these skills. That's something
the
great
goal.
that's the
That's the
goal.
goal. And then all of these people take this home and to their children and who
and,
they're raising.
and society becomes better.
Yes, it's
There
our
we
little slice to world peace, Lisa.
I believe it is. I always say together we can make the world a better workplace. And when we make a better workplace, and a healthier world will follow, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Positively.
I just love this conversation, Tina. So do you have any last pieces of advice that you'd like to share?
Sure. So I get asked this a lot of time, if you had one thing to share.
Yeah.
And what helps me the most is when I start to feel up against the wall and I start to feel that level of stress. First question I ask myself is, what's in my control? What's out of my control?
Yeah.
And it really lays it out really, really fast.
Love it.
Is it, if it's external, what needs to happen there? If it's internal, I'm empowered. I can make the change. But that to me is my first line of defense every time I feel stress.
That is so important. The clarity that it brings, I think is very valuable in helping leaders make those decisions, and not trying to change things that are out of the control, but what can I change within me or shift so that I shift my behavior so that things will line up. I love it. Love
and
it.
Especially if you're working in an organization, there's a lot that's out of your control.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
There really is. And you have to learn. In order to survive in an organization, you have to be able to let go of those things that are
right.
Maybe you'll get to them, and maybe you'll get to that position to have more impact. But really, what's in my control?
Absolutely. And, and like you said before, these times that we're living through, anyone who's trying to, control the impact of COVID is gonna make, burn out just thinking about it, right? So what can we control? We can control how we bring people back, how we support them, how we set up, hybrid workplaces, how we engage and create safe spaces for people. Those are the things as leaders that we can control, right?
And the other piece of that is use yourself as the guide.
Right.
How does it make me feel?
Right.
If I try this on, I just canceled a trip to New York that I was really looking forward to. Every time I thought about going, I would get anxious. Right. Every time I thought about canceling, I would relax.
That, we forget to do that, right? Check in with ourselves. So special, like it's so simple and yet so wise. It's like, why am I stressing out? Does it feel good, or does it feel like that's those very, very important. Excellent advice. Now I can see in your background there, you have Mastery Under Pressure. It's one of your books. Yes.
I do.
Yes.
That is my book. It's also my program. So you can get it on my website at masteryunderpressure.com or at Amazon. And I also have a quiz, Lisa. It's called masteryunderpressure.net.
Okay. Masteryunderpressure.net.
And it's a peak performance quiz where you can see where you are on those scales of focus, relaxation, and all those skills that we talked about.
Excellent.
And get a little feedback about it. And if you want to talk to me, you can reach me.
Excellent. So if people go to your website, then they'll be able to contact you that way?
Yes, they can. And it has again, if anybody's really interested in making some time going over the quiz, there's also a link to book 30 minutes with me.
Right. Okay, great. So take the quiz. Masteryunderpressure.net is the quiz, and masteryunderpressure.com is the website.
Yes.
Correct. Excellent. Well, Tina, it's been wonderful. I always love our chats. I always learn so much from you. And thank you again, Peter Beckenham, for introducing us.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, listeners. And learn more about Tina's Mastery Under Pressure program. Go to her website and also take the quiz. Thank you, and talk to you next time.